Here we have two filmmakers who have achieved the unthinkable. They made their first feature. So we're really happy to have them here to talk about the process.
Yay, we did it. Woo.
So we're going to start with a trailer of Alex's film, Coaching While Black.
The story of how Tex arrived is a long one, but it's also one definitely worth telling.
I've never seen a team like that in Canada before. It was just one of a kind.
We're bringing all these guys in from out of province. How is that okay?
Some people are excited, other people are like, we don't want this team.
With success, you got a bullseye on your back for sure. With a bullseye on your back, people want to see you slip.
And now we'll watch a clip from Paul's film.
Michael!
What?
You put the toilet paper on wrong. It's supposed to go over the top like a waterfall. You put it on the wrong way.
No, I didn't.
Then who did? A ghost?
Hey, Sue. Are you suggesting that they opened our door? Come on in.
Hey, Mike.
Went upstairs.
L.O.P.
Used the washroom.
I'm on the toilet.
Kindly changed the toilet paper. Put it on the wrong way, mind you, and then left.
Yes.
All before we came back from the restaurant.
Amanda and I are celebrating death tonight. It's the anniversary of my dad's death, and Amanda's childhood neighbors died.
They were murdered. Oh, don't drink that. It's gotta be 30 years old.
It'll make people go crazy.
Yeah, I shouldn't have that moonshine.
Oh.
I think your friend is passed out in the washroom.
What is with you? You've been acting very weird lately.
I'm not acting weird.
I just put my lipstick on.
What are you up to, Sue?
It's Beck or Robbie. One of them used the bathroom.
It was probably you.
So as you can see, we have two very different types of films. And both of the films are screening at the Reelworld Film Festival this weekend. So make sure to get your tickets. So both of you have made some shorts before, and I'd love to hear what made you realize that this was the right project for your first feature. Maybe we'll start with you, Paul.
Sure. Well, yes, I have made a bunch of shorts in the past, and I think why I jumped on, well, I mean, why I made this movie was because making feature films is what I actually want to do. I don't want to make short films my entire life. So I just wrote it and did it. That's pretty much it. And like the experience I've had having shorts in other festivals has been not what you would expect when you're a young filmmaker. You have this dream, like bring your short to a festival, and then someone's like, "Oh, that was great. I'm gonna fund your next thing or something." That's never been my experience. Yeah, I just decided I'm gonna do it before I get too old and don't want to do it.
Right. Alex, your route to filmmaking has been untraditional. Maybe you could talk a bit about your background as a talk show host and some of the projects that you worked on before you embarked on your first feature.
Yeah, I started out in front of the camera. You know, Coaching While Black is a sports doc, basketball, right? And so I do have a background in hoops. And when I was transitioning, I was working a lot in the modeling industry. I was working as an actor, you know, trying to learn. And I actually thought my first type of content or something would actually be a comedy or something. But the Gifted Gab, which I started with Andre, really exposed me to producing stuff. Not necessarily, oh, short or this or this. It was really just about making things. And those reps led me to Coaching While Black. And also led me to founding the Collective for Black Iranians. And when we were doing that, you know, it was a lot of educational stuff, a lot of short docs on lived experiences and the histories of Afro-Iranians. And then in the middle of all that, you know, Coaching While Black kind of just fell into my lap, and I'm like, okay, like let's make it. Yeah.
So that started off as a podcast, right? You interviewed the coach, and can you talk a bit about that? Like how you got introduced to him and what made you realize, wow, there's really an interesting story here, enough to turn it into a film?
Yeah, it was 2020. It was a pandemic, and you know we were still doing the podcast. And this guy I had actually went to high school with here in Toronto had approached me and said, "Yo, you got to talk to this guy, this coach. He's got an incredible story." I'm like, "All right, man. Like, I'll look into it and get back to you," type of thing, right? And you know, I started doing the research on this guy, and you know, I'm looking online, and you know, his success and his stint as a head coach was really well documented. There was a lot of controversy surrounding him, and it wasn't his first time on camera. And so as I'm, you know, doing this vetting process, I'm seeing the film in my head, you know. And so I approached him and I said, "Hey, like, you know, your story is incredible, and I want to work on telling it with you." And I didn't really know in what capacity. I didn't know if it was going to be a movie. I didn't know if it was going to be a pod. I just knew I wanted to tell it because I related to it so much. And so that kind of began that process of like, okay, what does that look like? You know, and conceptualizing that and mapping it out and trying to get it funded.
Can you give a quick explainer, just a couple lines on what the film is about?
Yeah, so it's a sports documentary about an American basketball coach who came to the prairies. He took over a struggling college program, and he turned it around. You know, and after their second championship, he was fired, right? And nobody knows why. And you know, there's a lot of speculation as to why he got let go. But what I saw, because I had experience being in that conference, playing there and stuff like that. It was like he was crucified for doing things a different way. You know, he's bringing in a lot of inner city kids like me from Toronto into the prairies in a time where it was really, really conservative. Everybody wanted to have, like, you know, farm boys on their team and stuff like that. And that was their formula. And that was what they were known for. So here comes this big black guy. He's American, so that's already a first strike. He's black, there's a second strike. And on top of that, you're bringing, you know, kids that are perceived a certain way by these conservative people, right? And so I could relate to that. You know, I was there at that same time. Not at that same time, a little bit later, but I experienced a lot of the same things. And so it was like, okay, I'm telling my story in a sense too. So yeah.
And that kind of, you know, segues into my next question for Paul, because this is a comedy and you have a bunch of improv actors in the film, and you yourself come from an improv background. So can you talk a bit about the process of working, or well, directing actors that you have worked with sort of as peers? Like you've, you know, acted with them in sketch comedy, and now they're the actors in your first film, and you share a similar background. So can you talk about that?
Yeah, it's a lot easier to direct people you've worked with for so long. And we've done like fringe shows together as well as, you know, hundreds of improv shows. So we all kind of got each other. And the film actually, with the kind of budget I'm dealing with, the roles were written specifically for them. So the direction was, there wasn't a lot of direction because they were them. So it was easier. And yeah, again, I have to choose the cast based on how well I know them and how much they are available.
Right.
So it's, I guess, just same thing. It's easier than directing someone else because you don't even have to say much. So even if when they improvise lines, it's like that's what the character would say.
Right.
So yes, it's easier than directing other people, I would say.
So let's talk about that budget for a second, because this film was made for under 2,000 Canadian dollars. So can you... So can you talk a bit about how that budget impacted your creative decisions?
Sure.
And also the duration of the shoot, because I know it was a long one.
Yes. Well, I guess first of all, there was no budget per se. It was just me. I'm gonna make a movie. I may have been unemployed at the time, so yes. And so with that in mind, it took like I had to write specifically for again the actors. And I knew it was going to take a while, and the entire production took 4 years. And it took that long, yes, because there's no budget, and also because everyone is volunteering their time, and everyone has to make a living doing other stuff, including myself. So scheduling, and here's the mistake I made. I wrote a movie with mostly 5 people in a room. So scheduling all those people to come in is incredibly difficult. So we didn't have very many days where they were all there, and I had to shoot specifically more medium shots and close-ups because the other cast members weren't there. So it took, quite often you're shooting 1 or 2 shots every couple weeks. And those actors are talking to another actor who isn't the actor they're supposed to be talking to, or sometimes we had a chair with a happy face on it, and that's who they're talking to. But it took a long time, and it's a very slow process, and yeah, one of the actors' hair is getting grayer as the movie progresses. So yeah.
And so for both of you, both your films were largely shot, the pandemic went on for 3 years and most of your film was created during that time. Alex, can you talk a bit about the challenges of making this film, working with people remotely? You mentioned, you worked with some different cinematographers on the film and you had to get everyone on the same page and make sure that the look stayed consistent. So what were some of those challenges that you had to deal with?
Yeah, I think after having the experience of doing narrative as well, I think doc is a lot harder because like you plan out a certain number of days, you schedule the days, but there's just so many moving parts, and on top of that, you don't know what you're gonna get. And so I had 4 different cinematographers help me with this film of varying experiences, backgrounds, and at certain points, I would have 3 of them on set at the same time, just so that one person could continue, like that continuity was at least with one person, right? So even if like the next time I shot, I only had 2 guys, one of them was there at the first shoot. So I'd never done something so big. So a lot of it was like, I'm just learning as I'm going, and I made so many mistakes, like there's some things that look like, oh my God, how did I let that get, and you get fatigued from watching, watching it over and over and over again, and sometimes you have to let it sit and come back with fresh eyes. But I gave myself a deadline that I did not make twice. But I also gave myself a lot of grace and kind of just allowed myself to make those mistakes. And I think sometimes we are our harshest critic, right? But you don't want to make it tougher on yourself mentally, so just trying to keep everybody on the same page, making sure there's constant communication, and really deferring. Like this project, I really deferred to other people's genius. I had really experienced cinematographers, and I had also more newer cinematographers, but I also let these guys chime in and help me direct it as well, right? So.
And how did you assemble that creative team? How did you find these people? Were they people that you had previously worked with or that were recommended to you by friends or people in the industry?
So initially I started working with a producer. I already had my development money. I had about, I think, $35K when I approached him to do the project. And he's like, okay, we entered into an option agreement. He said, he was really experienced, and he was like, we can bring some more money to the project. It's a dope story. Our option agreement ran out, and we pitched it to a couple of broadcasters, but the response really was, this guy's never done anything of this stature before, you know? But then when the option ran out, I was just like, you know what, let me just figure it out on my own. And so my 35K ended up becoming 175K over the course of like 2 years. And because I didn't have my deliverables were, you know, only for TELUS through StoryHive. And TELUS is a great program. Like, their StoryHive program's awesome. It's really flexible. And they were really patient with me when I was trying to get this thing off the ground. And yeah, you just, like, there's no rush, you know? I really just took my time with it. And that is really why it became what it became.
Paul, since you have an improv background, I'm curious about your script. How much of it did you feel like you had to have ready going into the shoot, and how much room did you want to leave for improv, for play, for things to evolve as it was being shot, considering you were working with a talented group of improv actors?
Yeah, so I would say, like, most of what I wrote is in the movie. It's just they add. And it's not necessarily I left room for it, but I knew, or I guess that is what it is. I did leave a bit of room. I knew they were gonna joke around and improvise. So I kind of I would let them play, essentially, and see what we would get. But mostly they stuck to the script, which is nice for editing. But yeah, I think there was a bit of room, and in terms of the improv mostly came from working with, like, the chaos of not knowing what was going to happen, because a lot of I have zero budget, so things are I constantly have to adapt to situations. So that's where the improv came in, and the actors were obviously a great help for that. And yeah, so that's improv on my end as a director, I would say, yeah.
Yeah, let's talk a bit more about that improv, because you were wearing many hats. You weren't just a director, you were also doing lighting, you were doing all kinds of things.
Yeah,
so.
I did everything. I had one of the actors' brothers, his name's David. He was there about 70% of the time, recording audio, the dialogue from the actors, and boom. But sometimes he wasn't there, and I had to do that too, which it's not easy. Yes. What was the question again?
Just like the improvising you were doing on set, kind of running around, like, you're wearing so many hats, you're switching between so many roles as well.
Yes. I mean, like I was saying before, it's you're just working with the chaos, and that's the thing that that you kind of learn in improv is when you're working with doing a scene on stage. You think it's going one way, and then the other person says something completely different, and you have to roll with that. And so having that background in improv really helped play out, I guess, my calmness when things didn't work. Like, for example, the pandemic, when that came and we weren't finished shooting, we were close to being finished, but I had to come up with a way to do the scene we needed to do without actors, which the scene was a monologue. So I came up with an idea of, okay, so that I can't do that scene, in that particular scene, but I can have the audio of that scene, and I can cut away to another moment in the house that we were shooting at where another scene could possibly take place. So I had to rewrite a new scene that's all visual, and I can still send the actors my audio equipment to record some ADR over the pandemic, and I could use that to have that in the background, but then focus the camera on a new scene. So the improv helped finish this movie, I would say.
Right. One thing you mentioned earlier is that you found it's much easier to work with people that you have worked with before. Alex, you were not familiar with any of the people that are in your film, any of the subjects. How did you go about and I'm sure anyone who's directed a documentary or made a film on a sensitive subject would be curious about this as well. How did you go about establishing trust with all the people that were in your film? How much prep time was there? How much time did you have to get to know them?
That's a really good question. I really focus on the relationship and building the trust. The fact that we shared, basketball in common helped a lot. A lot of these guys, my point of contact wasn't Coach. It was that friend who told me about Coach, who's in the documentary as well. And I mean, relationships are not, cookie cutter. Everybody's different. Everybody's sensitive to different things. And so it really became about, like, those guys are my friends now. I'll hit them up and we'll chat, and, they ask questions, and they're still really, really involved, even just outside of the film, in what's going on and how they can be, like, Edmonton's really, like, a really cool, tight-knit community. And then a lot of the guys are from Toronto, so when you're in a place where, I don't know why this is, but I'll see random people from Toronto in, like, random places in Edmonton and Calgary, and, like, you know each other from somewhere. So there's that share. So I had that with a lot of the people in the film. And honestly, a lot of them didn't trust that I was gonna do the story justice. I had to kind of convince them what my perspective was, where I was coming from, because they all shared one sentiment, and they felt like Coach had been wronged, right? And that's one thing I realized as I was talking to more and more people. Everybody I spoke to didn't make it into the film. But from the players' side, everybody spoke about Coach the exact same way. And I had never seen that from players, talking about how the impact one person had on their lives. I'm sure there's some athletes here that have had coaches in their lives, and that's a very influential position to be in. Like, you're spending time with somebody's kids, you're going to war with these guys, day in, day out. And so there was a lot of pushback from some of the people that were like, they thought that I was coming in there to fuel the fire and continue to crucify it. But I'm like, no. I'm trying to tell it from this perspective. And even in the beginning, I really wanted to get both sides. And what I started to see, the players started to open up and they're, okay, we'll be part of the film. But then it was like the administration, other coaches, people that weren't a part of the team. And then I started to see a pattern there. Coaches didn't want to be part of the film. Administration would throw up roadblocks. There was a situation when we premiered the film in Edmonton, and we're doing our press run. And so, CTV, CBC, all the outlets are, given the film press. And there was one company that was like, cool, yeah, we're going to do a feature, we're going to do it like at the theater that you guys are premiering at. And the day of the interview, they ghosted us, And I'm like, this is weird, this is very unprofessional. And I go to find out that a former coach from that same institution was also a sports reporter at that broadcaster, and they had, convoluted and said, like, hey, we're not going to cover this, and they're muddying the waters, And that's when I started to realize that I'm kind of treading on something a little bit bigger than Coach and what happens to him in the film and stuff like that. And I was like, okay, I got to keep going, And it was really scary because I'm like, I don't know what I'm getting myself into. I felt like I'm at a, like a true crime, like investigative, like I felt really, So I started getting nervous, and I'm like, yeah, I don't know, but you follow through and continue with it, and yeah, I'm glad we didn't stop that. So yeah, so it was a lot of rapport that I had to build with all these different people that appear in the film.
Yeah. So you both mentioned all the mistakes that you made on this project. So what would each of you say are your greatest learnings, and what advice would you give to people that are thinking about making their first feature?
Yes. So I think the best thing, making a movie with nothing is probably the greatest I mean, I'm sure we all love film. We've listened to every director probably say this, but making your own film is the best kind of film school. And it's true, because especially if you're doing everything yourself, because you're wearing all the hats. So you kind of have your foot in everyone's position. So at future projects, I guess, you're familiar and you can empathize with everyone on the crew. So this is my first feature, but I guess for advice, if you're gonna make something like this with zero money, I learned that you could do anything. You can have a big car chase scene, and you don't have to show the cars. You can do something. You can do something crazy. And you've seen these films, but you don't recognize them because they're done so well. It's manipulation. So you can do anything. So I would say, write whatever you want, and also write more than you think you need, because the one of the problems I did run into was I would say cutting too much from the script at the beginning, like doing my final edit of the movie in the first and in the final draft of the script, because when I came to shooting, I realized, I actually do need the shot of them going from point A to point B, which doesn't tell the story, but it's needed as like a breath, because you're kind of trapped in this house, and all of a sudden it's a break from this. So it's like, it was very helpful to realize that, and also making a movie where you have no budget or anything like that means you have full creative control, and you have as much time as you want to make mistakes. And I made mostly mistakes, and you have time to go back and fix them if you need to. Sometimes those mistakes come up, you're able to come up with new ideas. That's whatever I just said right there is my advice.
What about you, Alex?
The biggest thing I learned is I don't really like producing at all. It's a headache. Like, this film was the most challenging thing I've had to do in my life. And I've done a lot of challenging things. I've accomplished a lot of things. But the drama surrounding the film, I was involved in a road rage incident in the middle of my production. So I had to put the film on pause just to heal. I was bedridden for 2 months. I had my foot surgically repaired. And I was like, man, like, what's a film? You're like, why? Like, we're talking life and death here, right? But then you realize that, well, you can't just drop the film. You got to finish it. You started this thing. There's money involved. And so what I learned is that, if you really want to do something, you really want to get something done, like, you will find a way to do it. Like, no matter what. Like, there's so many things that happen, and I had so many excuses to say, yo, you know what? I need to stop and, like, get my priorities in order. But I made a commitment. I made a promise to a lot of people, right? And I got to follow through on that, And so what I really learned, you still make mistakes. But I really learned, if you really want to get something done, you're going to find a way to do it, no matter what, right? Mistakes can be corrected, right? And you want to surround yourself with people that believe in a vision and see what you're trying to do. But the biggest thing I learned is just give yourself grace. I think that's one thing you need in this industry, is that you're not going to get it right. There's no roadmap. There's no manual. Nobody knows what they're doing. I don't care if you've been 20 years in this game. Nobody knows what they're doing, right? And so when you're walking into these rooms with people, because I used to walk into these rooms and I see people with these credits are crazy and they're working on, 8-figure, 9-figure projects, and I was intimidated. But then I'm like, no, they're figuring it out too, just like I am, right? And so that's kind of the great, film is like the great equalizer. It's like every time you're starting a new project, you're starting from zero again, right? And so I think really what I learned, and just having patience. Patience is so important in this industry. It's not overnight. It takes years to become an overnight success. And I'm still working, just trying to, I still feel like I'm not in. I still feel like I haven't done anything. But you got to sit back and really, like, man, okay, you did one film, even whether it's a short, whether it's a YouTube video, whatever it is, like, to make something takes a lot of energy, and that's spiritual. It's not even, it's not financial, anything, it's spiritual. And so that's the thing I really, it made me respect the process a lot more. Yeah.
So we're going to open it up to questions from the audience. Does anybody have any questions?
I just wanted to ask, what did you spend the $2,000 on?
Yeah, good question. This pizza.
That's a lot of pizza.
That's 3 years worth of pizza will cost you that. 3 years, so that plus renting lav mics from Long & McQuaid, which were $12 per lav mic. That's a huge budget for me. And that and some transportation.
Yeah, I saw you filmed this in black and white. Was that an inspiration from following Christopher Nolan?
No, that's because I didn't have any money, and I couldn't. So, like, what makes, like, a lot of things make a movie look good, and one of them is wardrobe and set design. I whatever I could do to limit that cost of things. So meaning wardrobe, I could just look at the contrast of things. So one of the main characters in color, her dress is pink and black. It's like hideous. But but in black and white, it looks kind of cool. And then you're also not doing any set dressing. You don't have to paint the walls. The walls are disgusting, like beige color, and so that gives me control with the lighting. I had a redhead kit and a paper lantern on a dimmer, and you're able to, like, shape things with light and create a better space with the room that way. So that's why it was in black and white, because it was cheaper, and that's pretty much it.
No, the trailer was totally awesome.
Oh, thanks.
I share the pain because I did my first feature with minimum budget, and actually it was a short turned into a feature.
Awesome.
And my producer was like, no, we're gonna turn this into a feature. And I was like, okay, we wanna use RE Alexa or Red. And then I ended up, filming on a Sony FX3, and I only to learn that they made a $40 million movie with the FX3. So.
Yes, that's right. This movie was shot with the Fuji X-T3. So another prosumer camera, and this was, I think, their first 4K camera, and I had one lens, and then near the end of the movie, I had 2 more lenses.
Any other questions? Oh, there's one there.
My question is, what kind of an agreement do you have with the cast who shot for nothing? And I think just his answer there, his short turned into a $40 million film. What kind of agreement do you have with your cast?
Well, I would say we're all equally, whatever happens with the movie, they're all equally, including myself, we're all splitting whatever happens. They have my texts, so.
That's good enough.
And I, like, we're all sharing this. This is all our movie. We all spent years on it. I know that I heard that David Lynch did the same thing with Eraserhead. Everyone who worked on that owns a piece of it, and one of the people said that it helped pay for their kids' college. So hopefully something happens with this and I can pay for their kids' college.
Do we have any other questions in the audience?
My question is, I know it's for both of you, being that it's your first feature, what are things that, and I know you spoke about it, Alex, already, things that were ruminating even after you completion that you guys wish you could have redone different or done differently or plan to do differently, sleep deprivation, for your next film?
For me, I think I would have gotten, my score guy involved a lot earlier, especially after hearing the panel yesterday about, music. Music is so important in a film. It's like, especially a doc, what they're giving you is one thing, but the music is another way to, elicit a certain emotion out of your audience, right? And I kind of wish I was thinking about that a lot earlier. And so now, for my next films, I'm thinking, as soon as possible, getting, score thought about, from the jump. So that's the biggest thing, I think.
Crew. I mean, I wish just someone else came out to volunteer. That's pretty much because weirdly enough, one of the most complicated things working on this movie was the continuity over 4 years and trying to figure out what direction the plate and the fork were on the table. Luckily, the actors who are using the props were helpful with that. But just having another hand there, I think, would have been much easier. And kind of what you said about music. When I was editing the movie, I had a temp track in there. And then when it's like time to add the music, and I don't have a budget, like you're kind of screwed. You're just screwing yourself over. So it took me a long time to find public domain music that sort of fit that tone. I found it, but I wish I planned that a bit better. I wish I came in with the music beforehand. I had ideas with music when I was writing, but they were obviously I couldn't get the rights to those. So knowing the music, I think, would also be a big thing. And also another thing is social media. I when doing the festival, like applying to festivals, I'm nobody. Like I'm up against big productions, people that have money, and I'm looking at those other productions, and they have this whole social media thing. They have all their photos of their movie, the BTS. They have little behind-the-scenes stories, and I wish I did that as well, because I think any type of promotional material or any sort of hype you have with your movie will help you get noticed a bit more. And I think that hurt me in the past, because when I was applying, like there's really nothing. I had a website. I created the social media things, but there's just the poster and the trailer out there. And I think having that sort of community, like connection to the audience beforehand, would have helped get me in more festivals, I think. Yeah.
Okay. Well, thank you both, and congratulations.
Thanks. Thank you.